Flammable cladding and building certifiers. Let's have a look. Good evening everyone, Florian Heiser here and welcome to another episode of Heiser Says. I've got my stein of coffee and I thought we'd look at an issue with regards to flammable cladding and building surveyors. Okay, now this is an article from the ABC. If you're not familiar, there have been a lot of issues with aluminium composite cladding that's been put on buildings down, particularly in Victoria and all throughout Australia, that is flammable. And if it's flammable and can catch on fire, particularly on residential buildings, it can cause a lot of issues. It can be a life safety issue and it can help fires spread where they shouldn't. So let's have a look at this article. So, flammable cladding leads to insurance crisis, which could see the construction industry grind to a halt. Good work on the title there, James. I like that one. Grinding to a halt. I hope it won't happen. The cladding crisis has escalated with Victoria's building industry in danger of grinding to a halt because building surveyors can no longer get professional indemnity insurance. To be a registered building surveyor with the Victorian Building Authority, a person must have PI insurance without any exemptions. The same rules apply in New South Wales and Queensland. That's for consumer protection. That's what it is. It's consumer protection. But insurance companies are no longer providing this option, and the industry is warning work on buildings may simply stop. Other surveyors have reported that the cost of their insurance premiums and excesses have more than quadrupled. More than quadrupled. Building surveyors are responsible for signing off on buildings, including building permits and occupancy permits. While local government building surveyors can also sign off on permits, private building surveyors have been the preferred option for most of the building industry. The chief executive of the Australian Institute of Building Surveyors, Brett Mace, warned the building industry could start to slow down over the next year. I think we're going to see a slowdown regardless of what happens with this circumstance, but that's just taking a guess there. And I have a coffee on that one. Thumb up and like if you think so too. So, we think it's a huge crisis, Mr. Mace said. If building surveyors are unable to be registered, then you're not going to be able to provide approvals for the construction industry. It will come to a stop. Now, what you have to understand is, while this does sound alarming, that the construction industry will come to a stop, this isn't the first time that this has happened in industries where just access to PI insurance has been quite difficult. It's the market response. So, the Master Builders Association said up to 30% of building surveyors are required to renew their insurance by the end of June. If they're unable to obtain insurance or the insurance offered to them is non-compliant due to exclusions being imposed, many building projects could come to a standstill, the MBA said in a statement. It's a disaster. Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews is aware of the insurance problem, telling a Property Council lunch that the state had stepped in as an insurer of last resort in the past for other sectors. I'm very much aware of how real this issue becomes next week. I've had some conversations with ministerial colleagues this morning about this very matter, Mr. Andrews said. The problem, he said, was not unique to Victoria. The feds should be involved. That would be good, but we won't let anyone be uninsured. There are some steps we can take, Mr. Andrews said. He told the Property Council the government wanted no inhibitors on the housing and building sector. Well, I know you don't, but since the cladding crisis exploded after London's Grenfell disaster, insurance agencies have introduced exemptions which do not cover cladding on their policies for building surveyors and architects. The last agency to cover cladding, Landmark Underwriting, will no longer provide such cover as of July, building surveyors have confirmed. This means building surveyors will no longer be able to find appropriate insurance as policies expire, forcing businesses to shut down operations. If they don't have the compliant insurance, they can't be registered and therefore they can't provide building approvals, Mr. Mace said. It suddenly won't stop overnight, but as building surveyors can't get insurance, you'll find them going out of business and there'll be a slowdown in the construction industry. If you don't have anyone left being able to be registered in 12 months, then it'll stop. I find that hard to believe. And later in this video, will look at an interview I do with my good friend, Grant Mason, an insurance broker, and he'll explain this, other ways that industries get around these similar things. There is an acknowledgement from senior figures that it is a serious problem, with fire engineers also aware of the growing crisis. Yes, they've been hit really hard. It's a disaster, said Jonathan Barnett, National Chair of the Society for Fire Safety Engineers Australia. They're the ones who sign off on a building. They certify that it was built properly. They provide building permits. They provide the occupancy permits. If they're not doing that, then I think construction stops. Well, then the government will, their certifiers, you'll have to go to them. The cladding issue is a ticking time bomb. Across the sector, action is being demanded from the Victorian government. It says it is aware of the issue and working to fix it. The revelations come as Mr. Andrews told ABC Radio Melbourne that taxpayers would contribute to fixing the problem, as well as new laws to crack down on Phoenix companies that are set up for the sake of one project. Victoria will also set up a new dedicated authority, Cladding Safety Victoria, to deal with the crisis. There are thousands of buildings in Victoria with non-compliant cladding, yes. So government and industry are grappling on how to rectify dangerous cladding, particularly who pays for remediation works and if anyone is liable. Professional indemnity is the canary in the coal mine for this industry, one senior figure told the ABC. Building surveyors who do not wish to be named said the government needed to step in or the whole building sector would stop operating. Opposition planning spokesman Tim Smith said the Andrews government had not done enough to respond to the problem. The building industry will grind to a halt if private surveyors cannot be covered by professional indemnity insurance, he said. This cladding issue is a ticking time bomb for the whole industry, not just homeowners who now live in worthless fire traps. A website set up under the name Cladding Safety Victoria suggests the state government will create a new one-stop shop agency to tackle the crisis. A cached search of the Cladding Safety Victoria website, set up 5 days ago but now displaying an error message, suggests the new body will provide free services and assistance to apartment owners faced with removing combustible cladding. The state government has not formally announced the creation of the new body, but Mr. Andrews told ABC Radio Melbourne he would make substantial, very detailed announcements very soon. The draft website said CSV's aim was to get buildings fixed and made safe quickly, and it would oversee 6 phases of the construction process. Ooh. Taxpayer funds will have to be used. What is not clear on the website web page is who will foot the bill for these for the free services. Although he is not commenting on the establishment of CSV directly, Mr. Andrews said of addressing the housing crisis, there will have to be taxpayers' money and there will have to be government allocations. There can potentially be some money, some recovered from those who have done this, have basically committed these errors, and have used the dodgy products, he said. The state budget earlier this year earmarked $160 million to remove combustible cladding from government buildings. That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money. Earlier this year, owners of apartments at Melbourne's La Crosse Tower were made aware of more than $5.7 million. Yes, we've looked at that in a class action lawsuit, but similar actions over other buildings have been rendered impossible because the construction companies went bust. Yes, and we've seen that as well with Mascot. The company doesn't exist anymore. We've had a situation where a whole range of Phoenix companies, they exist for the purpose of building that particular building, and then they're gone at law afterwards, Mr. Andrews said. We don't rule out making some legislative changes so that we can go out after some of these Phoenix companies. Mr. Andrews acknowledged unit owners had been basically stranded and unable to sell their properties while investigations were ongoing. Okay, so it's interesting to see what issues are arising here because of the flammable cladding. The government's going to step in, there are insurance issues, and I thought to help everyone get an understanding of a perspective from an insurance broker, someone who deals with this industry, I phoned up my friend and I asked him if he would do an interview with me on my show. So guys, I will cut to that now. So to get a better understanding of this whole issue surrounding professional indemnity insurance, and just insurance in general, I've asked my good friend to join me. I'd like to introduce you all to Grant Mason from Also Insurance. He's a good mate of mine and my insurance broker. Welcome to the show, Grant. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, Florian.
So I sent you the article from Victoria where it's just highlighting the issues with regards to particularly fire cladding, and in this circumstance, building certifiers. And I know I've just paid you a lot of money to renew my insurance this year. So, like a week ago, you bastard. And and I noticed there was a clause in there as well. I made sure to ask you about that, which was the non-conforming clause with regards to fire cladding. So it's coming here for cladding and a whole lot of other things, an exclusion. So it's hit the architects. So what's going on with the building certifiers? How do you think this is all going to work out with them? The insurance company's just being greedy, or?
So, look, I suppose we can take a step back and look, it is a really difficult situation when you are in that profession. There is those exposures. So, look, I'm certainly not going to sit here and pretend let's make insurers, let's feel sorry for insurers, because I'm the first one to have a go at them and make sure that they're treating people right. They are businesses when it's all said and done. They bring in premiums, they pay out claims, they pay expenses, all those sorts of different things. When there's a sudden change, and cladding's a prime example, where you all of a sudden see a whole heap of change in the industry, that can create a lot of issues around current policies in place. Now, in the nature of the way these policies are, professional indemnity is called a claims-made policy. I'm not going to sit here and bore everyone about how the structure of these things are, but one of the advantages of a claims-made policy from the insurer is they relook at everything every year and make sure that it's the right policy, sometimes for them, sometimes for other people. And when you've got businesses out there like building surveyors that aren't always tied up with associations or things like that, can create gaps in the market. Now, going back to one of the areas where we're saying that they may not be able to get their licenses and that because of their insurance, it's, from what I can see, and Corin, you probably know better than I do with how these things, and how the article says that you can't have exclusions. I can't see anywhere where it actually says you can't have exclusions. They tend to be under the licensing situation, tends to be more with an acceptable insurance policy. So that's to stop you going getting a cheap nasty policy from someone that covers you for nothing and therefore leaves everyone else in the gun and you not free.
So that's consumer protection, really, isn't it? To ensure that mum and dad aren't going to be left high and dry because they've got someone with a PI insurance that's just not worth the paper it's written on. That's correct.
Now, as I know, we've even had the discussion previously with about this very exclusion with your insurance as well.
Well, yeah, I brought that up here on the screen for everyone to see. Just the non-conforming, non-compliant cladding exclusion for 2018. They've brought into it, which
one thing to remember here is the term about non-conforming, non-compliant. So with a lot of things, especially when, and I'm certainly not here giving legal advice, all sorts of trouble if I do.
Oh, if anyone comes to my channel for legal advice, they've got a whole lot of other problems, mate. Seriously.
But quite often we fall to the reasonable person test when you actually do get, say, in front of a judge and these sorts of things where some of these cases can come through. Now, if it's reasonable that when something was actually put in place, so for example, let's take one of your beautiful architecture drawings, and at the time it was deemed that there was no non-compliant cladding that you were using. It wasn't non-compliant. It wasn't even deemed as non-conforming or anything like that at the time. And a reasonable person in your situation would have been fine to use it. I don't see there being a major issue there. Has someone actually gone in there and said, oh, I'm not sure about this, this could be borderline, or this could be dodgy? Hang on, this is the same stuff that burnt on the tower in London or something like that. There's a different story involved there. And that's where they're really trying to my understanding is they're trying to protect, is against that blatant use of, let's say, rubbish.
So trying to address these issues, and from the insurance company's perspective, I mean, they just want to manage their risk. So that's
absolutely.
So that's why all of a sudden these certifiers are finding that their premiums have gone up, their excesses have gone up, because this material that's coming is just exposing all these businesses to risk, and that's all that they think about, isn't it?
Absolutely. So there's two sides of it. You use an example of accountants in the late 90s, which was before I actually started in the insurance world. They were, for a while there, they were almost uninsurable.
Accountants?
Yes. They found that they had prices of premiums and excesses that were just absolutely through the roof. Now they're probably not even, some accountants are probably less than 5% of those premiums, if not lower, and much better things. But that's because the actual industry moved together and became a lot more regulated and a lot more able to be insured, because they actually had better risk management internally. Another example is property valuers. They're almost impossible to insure these days, and if they do get insured, they're very expensive because they are a law upon themselves at times. I know there's some very good ones out there, but there are some interesting ones, and I think you've dealt with a couple in your time too, Florrie.
Never, mate, never. But so actually, that's kind of a positive takeaway that you've got there. This is really a market response to an industry that may not be mitigating or performing as well as it should, mitigating the risks. And the example you gave of the accounting industry, so then that industry stepped up to address those risks and improved in the long run. There's probably some teething issues that we're going through, and it kind of... Yeah.
Another example, which they used, the Victorian Premier uses the term of insurer of last resort, which they've done in other things. And government can actually jump in on that. They did it with the surgeons and doctors and things like that. And I'm not going to badmouth any medical people here, but if I tell you that they deal with it, we need to ask them to see what the rest of the world deals with. So they've got certain things set up where they've got an insurer of last resort. So there has to be an insurer out of the panel of 5 or 6 of them out there that has to insure them. They've got a maximum premium, which I know you certainly don't on your architecture business. You've got a maximum excess applicable and those things. And after a certain amount of claim, the government actually pays 50% of the claim above that. So it helps they co-insure with the insurer to make it insurable.
Ah, okay. So through the government, as a community, we're assuming that risk, or we're dulling that exposure for the insurance companies, so it's making it viable for them to actually assume that.
That's right. So hence the premiums stay more reasonable and affordable, so people can still have doctors out there, as a prime example, and surgeons and things like that. But we're not going and spending, I'll say, USA rates on doctors and surgeons and things like that. And the people actually have the ability to practice this without going bankrupt just every year on their insurance premium.
Okay. Oh, so that's sorry, I'm having an issue here with the software. We'll have to stay in this view with the insurers at the minute. Okay, so that's interesting. So where do you think the future is for all of this? And what, if what would be, I don't know, the best case scenario? Say you've got certifiers, they can't actually get their insurance, or their premiums are too high. Do you think the government will step in and become an insurer of last resort? Do you think it'll be a temporary thing, or what do you think would happen?
First of all, I find it interesting. It will be interesting to see how the governing bodies and the licensing groups handle these exclusions. So, as I said before, the term acceptable insurance policy rather than is quite often used in there. So, if they deem the current policies are available as acceptable, then obviously everything keeps going. There's also that may be deemed acceptable, and we'll see that the government may stand in as that to look after anything that comes from a cladding side of the area or where you can't get insurance. For groups that are probably much bigger and can afford it, there's always areas you can get insured, irrespective of what's available in Australia. There's many places around the globe that will insure these areas, so you will pay for it. And getting someone to be able to actually access those is a very small group of insurers, insurance brokers, etc. But that's what happened with accountants for a while. They'll start having to use what's called unauthorised foreign insurers, where it was a much higher premium, a much higher excess, and what's deemed as an unauthorised insurer in this country. It doesn't mean it's illegal, it's just you've got to go through a fair bit of paperwork and specific reasons of you can't get that insurance in Australia to be insured. So I think overall, look, government could well step in, particularly in the short term. The licensing groups definitely can be probably a bit more flexible or on their interpretation of what's an acceptable insurance policy, because the last thing anyone wants, and particularly any government wants, is construction to shut down.
Oh yes, no, it's definitely a vote winner, that one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I feel like every day I'm just talking about more and more construction issues and disasters and things like that. And I
suppose that is, sorry.
Oh, keep going.
Saying that even leads into selling a home, so you get pre-purchase inspections and things like that. So that's where that could even get into that area in the next stage as well. So all of a sudden, if you shut down the construction industry, you could very easily shut down, let's say, the whole property industry too, that you can't actually sell a house.
What about the people that do the building pest inspections as well?
I mean, there is potentially exposure there. That hasn't quite hit their policy yet about that. I suppose they don't have any direct dealing with, but at the same time, insurers tend to, and as you said, they're risk management books here, and when an issue like cladding happens, it happens all at once. We've seen a fair bit of it in the last, 2 years kind of thing. It's not just a one-off situation. We've seen it in numerous areas around this country alone, let alone internationally, and that has huge ramifications for the whole market in the insurance world.
Well, we're looking at I think 1,400 buildings that have been identified that they're not releasing the data from, and I can understand why they won't release it in one regard, because it's going to affect everyone who's bought in those properties, but also if you're going in there, you want to know about that. And the risk, it's a case-by-case basis on how much of a risk it is. On a commercial shop front, where it's going to be less risk, I'd imagine, than on a balcony with a barbecue, gas bottles, and cigarettes. And we're just seeing where that's all happening. Well, Grant, thank you very much for enlightening us about the industry that you're involved with on a day-to-day basis. I mean, what takeaway could you give for people that are maybe do you want to plug your business? You want to get brokers or surveyors to give you a call if they want to?
Oh, look, we're always happy to discuss these things with anyone. We will work with you to help. But the most important thing is notifying any potential matters to your current insurance broker, especially if your policy is looking at going to add more exclusions and things like that. By notifying them today before it is on record on today's policy. So if you, as a business owner, have been even slightly involved in one of these buildings that may have a query about them and you're not sure, I would strongly suggest dropping an email to your broker and at least putting it on record to cover your backside and also everyone else's, and therefore that's not going to be an issue going forward with that. Just because you're notified doesn't mean that your policy, that goes up through the roof and all that kind of stuff and is deemed as a claim, you're just doing your due diligence and notifying the insurer. That'd be the most important thing in that situation.
Oh, Grant, thank you very much for joining us, and I'll talk to you next time. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again for joining me for this episode of Heiser Says. Please like, share, and subscribe. Ding the bell to see my daily updates, and I'll see you all again tomorrow. Bye for now.